The Honourable Amy Adams.
Mr Speaker, this week we've heard opposition parties rail large about the effect of the drop in dairy prices and the outlook for our farmers, and we've heard two themes coming through that I want to touch on, and the member who's just resumed his seat certainly repeated some of it. First of all, you hear opposition parties saying that somehow National's not backing the farmers, and suddenly there's a river of crocodile tears coming from opposition benches for the farmers. Well, I think, Mr Speaker, Nathan Guy said it exactly right in the House today. If you're going to stand in this House and talk about supporting farmers, let's look at the track record. First of all, which party in this House actually has farmers in its caucus? National. Does New Zealand First? No. Do the Greens? No. Do Labour? No. This is the party that has supported farmers for a long time. Where are the opposition? Where are the opposition when we're talking about reforming the RMA? Where are the opposition when we're talking about backing water storage? Where are the opposition when we're talking about sensible, moderate water standards that allow farmers to continue to farm? They oppose all of that. They oppose all of that, and yet they have the barefaced cheek to come in here and pretend that suddenly they're the defenders of the farmers. Well, Mr Speaker, farmers are not simple folk, even though the Labour opposition and the Greens and New Zealand First seem to think so. They have got long memories, and they know which party backs them. And Nathan Guy said it today, didn't he? How can the opposition parties protest on the steps of Parliament against free trade agreements, against the TPP, against removing tariffs to our economic exports, and then come in here and say, oh, the poor farmers. Oh, the poor farmers. We want you to pay 300% tariff into your markets, but boy, the poor farmers. So there's a word for it that starts with H that I'm not allowed to talk about. And then the other great fallacy we've heard from the bunch of people who have variable positions depending on the circumstances, so as not to offend speaking order, standing orders. The other great fallacy we've heard is that somehow the National Party has been blocking a diversification of the economy. Well, Mr Speaker, let's look at the track record there. I can tell you, Mr Speaker, that this is the party that backed rolling out digital infrastructure, digital skills across this economy, and the results are paying dividend. We know, Mr Speaker, that phase 1 of the broadband program alone is worth $33 billion to this country, and Labour opposed it. Labour opposed it. They voted against it. We know, sir, that even going back to that last issue, that program alone is worth $9.1 billion to the dairy sector alone over 20 years. $9.1 billion to the dairy sector, and Labour voted against it. Mr Speaker, we know that will create 100,000 extra jobs for highly skilled, highly paid workers in our economy, and the opposition voted against it. This is a sector, Mr Speaker, the ICT sector is our third largest export sector. And you don't want to hear the opposition talking about that anymore because they know they blocked it. ICT is our third largest sector, and last year, Mr Speaker, services worth more than $23.5 billion, 10% of our GDP, and 3% more than a few years ago. And in fact, exports in the sector rose 23% last year alone. So when you've got the ICT sector, exports going up 23% in 1 year, Mr Speaker, year-on-year growth across the sector of an annualised 9% over the last 10 years, and a sector where ICT stocks now make up 10% of the value of all the listings on the NZX. And Mr Speaker, 5 years ago that was just 1%. So 5 years ago, 1% of our stocks were ICT, now it's 10% alone. Now, Mr Speaker, we recognise on this side of the House that that's because we have innovative, hard-working, imaginative Kiwis out there doing it, but the difference is we've rolled out the infrastructure, the skills, the training, the R&D and the free trade agreements to allow them to do it. So, Mr Speaker, don't come into this House, I say to the opposition parties, and cry crocodile tears about diversifying the economy and supporting farmers when you block it at every opportunity you get.